Hey there. If you're a man in your 40s, 50s, or even beyond, and you've ever looked in the mirror and quietly asked yourself, how do I stay attractive? Not through youth, but through something deeper. Then this video is for you. Because let's be real for a second. There's a truth not many people want to say out loud, but today I can swear. Women aren't truly drawn to abs or wrinkle-free skin. They're drawn to depth, to stillness, to the kind of presence that makes them feel safe, even when you're not saying a word. And that's what I want to share with you today. Because as we age, something beautiful starts to happen. You stop needing to shine under bright lights. You stop needing to be the loudest guy in the room. What matters more is how grounded you are. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and felt invisible? Not because you disappeared, but because you stopped performing and somehow people just passed right by, or maybe you felt like the world started chasing all the wrong things while you were just trying to stand still and stay real. I've talked with a lot of men, business owners, retired soldiers, single dads, and they all told me the same thing. I don't want to compete anymore. I just want to be myself. I want to be seen, not as the boy I used to be, but as the man I've become. And if that's you, then congratulations, because that's the very place where real masculine presence begins. Let me tell you a story. There's a listener of mine, let's call him David. He's 53, an architect, a quiet guy. He once told me, at parties, I feel like I just fade into the background, like no one really sees me anymore. But something changed. He didn't dye his hair, didn't start hitting the gym every day. He just stopped performing and started being present. One evening, he walked into a dinner party, sat down, took a deep breath, didn't talk much, didn't force jokes, didn't try to fill the silence. He just made eye contact, stayed calm. And you know what happened? A woman came up to him after the party and said, "You made the whole room feel safer, like time slowed down, like we could finally breathe." They noticed him, not because he was loud, but because his stillness had weight. It made everyone else want to slow down too. And that's the kind of quiet power that doesn't fade with age. It grows stronger. Because the older you get, your attractiveness isn't about looks anymore. It's about stability. It's about how at peace you are with yourself, about knowing what you believe in and knowing what you don't need to prove anymore. And women, they feel that. They've already seen plenty of charmers. They're not looking for a mother show. They're looking for an anchor, and the man who brings presence, not performance, that's the one they never forget. Now, maybe you're sitting there thinking, but I don't feel attractive. I feel like I've been forgotten, like no one's really seen me in years. Let me tell you something. You're not invisible. You're just not loud. And those are two very different things, because true stillness isn't weakness. It's strength, under control. The Stoics had a word for this, ataraxia. It means a deep sense of calm, not from what you've achieved, but from who you've become. And when you carry that calm, people notice. They feel it the second you walk into the room. I want you to picture this. You're sitting at dinner, nothing fancy. You're wearing that fitted navy blazer. Your posture is relaxed but upright. Your breath is steady. You're not checking your phone. You're not scanning the room. You're just here. And the woman across from you, she feels it. Not because of what you say, but because of how you say it. Because you're not rushing. You're actually listening. Your eyes calm, steady, don't flinch. She might not say it out loud, but something clicks in her mind. This man makes me feel like I can finally exhale. That right there, that's real attraction. Not from trying, not from pretending, but from presence. You don't need to dye your hair. You don't need to dress like a 25-year-old. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just need to show up as the most honest, grounded version of yourself, wearing your years not like a burden, but like a crown. And yes, there are more things you can do to amplify that presence. We'll get into that soon. But for now, I want to leave you with this. Real attraction doesn't come from chasing attention. It begins the moment you start living with intention. So if you're ready to step into that, stick with me. We've got so much more to uncover. The woman sitting across from you, she feels it, not just from your words, but from how unrushed you are, from how fully you listen, from the steady way your eyes stay locked without flinching. She might not say it out loud, but something clicks in her mind. This man, well, makes me feel like I can finally breathe. And you know what? That right there is the deepest kind of attraction. It doesn't come from performance. It doesn't come from trying to be someone else. It comes from real presence. You don't need to dye your hair, chase trends, or compete with a 30-year-old guy. You just need to show up as the most honest version of who you are. Wearing your years not like a burden, but like a crown. And yes, there are a few ways to amplify that kind of presence. We'll get into those in the next parts. But before we continue, let me leave you with one thing to think about. True attraction, the kind that transcends age and appearance, begins the moment you stop chasing attention and start living with intention. And if you're ready to step into that, stick around. We've got much more to uncover. You know, I once sat down with a man in his 50s, an architect living in New York. Well-spoken, calm. There was something about him, this quiet steadiness that made it hard to look away. But here's the thing, what made him magnetic wasn't his looks. It was how he showed up in a room. He didn't need to say much. He didn't need the spotlight. But when he did speak, people paused to listen. A woman once told him, "You don't have to say anything at all. Your presence alone makes the whole room feel calm." And do you know why? Because his confidence wasn't a performance. It wasn't loud. It wasn't some alpha male energy trying to dominate the space. It was deeper than that, a kind of confidence that comes from loss, from failing, from standing back up, and from learning how to live with both. If you're in your 40s, 50s, or beyond, chances are you've been through a few storms, maybe a relationship that broke your heart, a career setback that shook your direction, or maybe just the quiet realization that somewhere along the way you ran too fast and lost yourself in the process. And then you start to understand you don't need to prove anything anymore. You just need to know who you are. I once asked a woman, "What is it about a man that draws you in when you can't quite explain why?" And she said, "It's when he walks into the room not trying to do anything, and yet I can't stop noticing him." That's what real confidence creates. It doesn't force attention. It just stands still and lets people come closer. Have you ever met a man like that? Someone who doesn't talk much, but you trust him almost instantly. Someone who doesn't smile all the time, but when he nods, you know he means it. That's not about looks. That's about inner strength. A confident man doesn't say, "I'm enough." He knows he's enough. And it shows in every glance, in every step. He doesn't interrupt to prove his point. He waits for the right moment and then speaks with calm. And women, they feel that. They've been around long enough to sense when a man's trying too hard. And they've become sensitive enough to trust a man who doesn't have to try because his presence already speaks volumes. I want you to picture this. You're at a small gathering. People are laughing, loud, cracking jokes, trying to grab attention. But you step back a little, holding your glass, observing, not hiding, not folding your arms, just grounded, quiet, but open. And then someone walks over and starts a conversation. Not because you were the loudest voice, but because something about you made them want to be near. That is what I call the weight of silence. You don't need to be the loudest man in the room. You just need to be the one people want to lean toward when the noise gets too loud. Let me say this clearly. Women aren't just drawn to what you say, they're drawn to how you say it, to the way you listen, to the stillness in your eyes, the steadiness in your posture, the strength in your silence. A man who knows his worth doesn't need to shout to be heard. He just stands tall and lets his calm speak for him. And you know what? In a world that's constantly spinning with noise and competition, a man who doesn't need attention to feel valuable is the most magnetic man of all. You know something, there's a very specific moment in a man's life when he stops asking, "Does this outfit make me look trendy?" and starts asking, "Does this reflect who I really am?" That's the moment you stop chasing trends and start standing in your truth. You move from trying to impress to leaving a lasting impression, from fashion to style. A woman once told me I don't remember exactly what he was wearing that night, but I remember how I felt when he walked into the room. Quiet, put together. Every detail said he knows who he is. That right there is real masculine elegance. Men in their 40s, 50s, or beyond, you don't need to dress like you're 25 to be attractive. In fact, the harder you try to look young, the more you lose the quiet power of your age. Women aren't drawn to wrappy jeans or hoodies with loud graphics. They're drawn to the man who chooses a well-fitted shirt, a structured blazer, a clean pair of leather shoes. No flashy logos. No trying to look like someone else. Just a message that says I know who I am, and I don't need to explain it. I once met a man in his 60s. He wore a white button-down dark jeans and polished brown shoes. No flashy accessories, no overpowering cologne, just simplicity and stillness in his eyes. And you know what happened? Every woman at that party remembered him. Not because he looked young, but because he carried himself with quiet self-respect. You ever notice that? The more a man matures, the more he realizes looking good isn't about what you put on. It's about how you carry it. A simple watch always on time. A soft scent not loud but present. A neat haircut. A well-groomed beard. None of it's for show. It's how you tell the world I take care of myself. Not for anyone else, but because I know I deserve it. Let me ask you this. The last time you walked into a room, did you show up as someone trying to get noticed or as someone ready to offer value? And if you've ever felt like you don't stand out enough, just remember this. You don't need to stand out. You just need to be unforgettable. And that usually starts with the simplest things. A clean pair of shoes, a steady gaze, a sense of order that doesn't try too hard, and a quiet posture that says, I know who I am. I'm not here to imitate the younger guys. I'm the deepest version of myself. Style doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to be honest and make you feel solid when you step outside. And women, when they see a man like that, they don't think he dresses well. They think he's got order in his life. He knows where he is and where he's going. I once asked a woman in her 30s, what makes a man attractive even when he's not young anymore? She smiled and said softly, the way he walks, not his abs, not his muscles, not a model's frame, but the way his body shows up grounded, steady, like he knows where he's going. You see, women aren't looking for perfection. They're drawn to energy. They notice how you take care of your body, not to flex, but to live with discipline. A man who walks upright with slow, confident steps, shoulders back, eyes forward, he gives off something rare. He hasn't given up on himself. Ever seen a 50-year-old man who still goes jogging every morning? Not to lose weight, not to show off, but simply because he values his body, like a loyal friend walking with him through life. That is real masculinity. No gimmicks, no ego, just a man showing up in the body he respects. I once worked with a man 56 years old, newly divorced. He told me I don't go to the gym to get six-pack abs. I just want to walk up the stairs without gasping, to carry my grandkid without straining, to look in the mirror and say, I'm all right. Have you ever felt that way? Not trying to look young again, but just trying to hold on to yourself, not letting time take away your sense of control. And here's the truth. Women don't need you to look like a Hollywood actor, but they'll definitely notice how you take care of yourself. Because to them, that means you might take care of them too. They're not looking for a perfect body. They're looking for the man who can walk with them all afternoon without complaining, who can carry things, hold the door, fix a tire, not to show off, but because he's still solid. And when you take care of your body, not for vanity, but for respect, you radiate something very few men do. Vitality, presence, freedom. Look, I'm not saying you have to go on some strict diet. I'm not saying you need to run marathons or hit the gym 7 days a week. All I want you to understand is this. Your attractiveness, it's not in your body. It's in the energy that your body carries. A man who keeps himself clean, solid, walks with grounded steps. He's the kind of man women instinctively trust. The kind of man they think if something went wrong, that's the guy I'd want standing next to me. Have you ever walked past someone, and even minutes later, their scent is still lingering in the air, making you pause and turn your head? I've had that moment, and I bet you have too. Scent. No one sees it. No one touches it, but somehow it goes straight to memory. It's not loud like a flashy outfit. It's not bright like a big confident smile, but it's unforgettable. Even after you've left the room, let me paint a picture. You're at a small gathering. You're not loud. You're not holding court. You're just there, calm, quiet, collected. And as you stand to leave, a woman leans in, breathes in gently, and whispers to her friend, "He smells like autumn, like warm wood, like someone I'd want to be closer to." Do you feel the power in that scent is how a grown man carves his name into memory without ever saying a word? One of my listeners once told me I fell in love with a man simply because he smelled like a peaceful afternoon. Even after we broke up, anytime I catch that scent again, I turn around. I remember him. Women remember through feeling. And scent. Scent is one of the strongest feelings there is. I'm not talking about expensive cologne. I'm talking about choosing a scent like you'd choose a message. The smell of wood, deep, warm, earthy. It feels like a man who's not in a rush. A little spice like a sharp gaze that's aware but never aggressive. A clean, soft musk, like a summer afternoon, calm, sunlit, peaceful. Have you ever picked a scent that people recognize? Not because it's loud, but because it smells like you. If not, I invite you to start. Because women may forget what you said, but they won't forget how you made them feel. And scent is the silent bridge between presence and memory. I know a lot of men overlook this. They think scent is a small thing, but look closely. The men who leave the deepest impressions are the ones who don't leave anything up to chance. It doesn't have to be strong. It doesn't have to be heavy. It just has to be intentional, like the way you live. Because here's the truth. A man can be quiet, calm, mature, say very little, but if he carries a scent that makes people feel warm, safe, and drawn in, he doesn't need to say much at all. Let me ask you something. Have you ever sat with someone for just a few minutes and felt like you've known them your whole life? It wasn't their looks. It wasn't their jokes. It was their depth. They didn't say much, but every word made you pause. They didn't try to impress you, but you found yourself wanting to know more. That's the power of a seasoned man. He doesn't have to be the center of attention. He is the place people come back to. I remember sitting with a man in his 50s, just the two of us at a little seaside cafe. He didn't talk about money, didn't mention his car or career. He spoke about loss and how he had to relearn love, starting with himself. Can you feel that, a man who can hold your attention for hours just by being honest? Women feel that too. One woman told me there are good-looking guys out there, but 5 minutes into the conversation, I'm exhausted. And then there are some men I could listen to them all night. And you know what? Intellectual attraction isn't about how many books you've read. It's about the questions you ask, not how much you talk about yourself. It's in how you listen, not how fast you jump in with a reply. It's in your calm, your patience, your sincerity. You know, one of my listeners once told me this. I was sitting next to a woman much younger than me. She was beautiful, smart, and carried herself with that kind of effortless charm. But what hit me wasn't that she needed me to be younger. She just needed someone deep enough, so she didn't feel alone when talking about life. You see what I mean? Women today aren't just looking for a man they can show off. They're looking for someone they can share with. Someone wide enough to hold their fears, deep enough to dream big with them, and real enough to never need to hide behind a mask. If you're in your 40s, 50s, or beyond, you don't have to chase youth. You just have to become the kind of man a woman can sit down with, pour a cup of tea, and say, "I feel peaceful when I talk to you." Because at the end of the day, looks might catch attention, but it's your steady mind, your lived-in heart that makes someone stay. And you know what? At some point in life, you realize you can't outrun time. But here's the beautiful part. The moment you stop fighting it, you start becoming more attractive. I once met a man in his 60s, silver hair, deep voice, calm eyes. He didn't hide his age. He didn't dye his hair. Didn't try to squeeze into a 30-year-old shirt. But when he walked into a room, people turned. Why? Because he wasn't trying to be anyone else. He was just fully himself, clear, grounded. He didn't ask for permission to be who he was. Have you ever felt that kind of energy? A man who doesn't need to show off, yet somehow you just want to be near him because he gives off the feeling I've been through things. And I'm still here calm, strong, and I don't need to explain myself. CH, if you let it scare you, it'll eat you alive with questions like, am I still attractive? Would anyone even choose me now? Should I do something to look younger? But Stoicism teaches something else. That real power doesn't come from staying young forever. It comes from owning every line, every scar, every year, and still being proud of who you are. You don't need a wrinkle-free face. You need eyes that don't flinch. You don't need the muscles you had at 30. You need a presence people can lean on. Picture this. You're sitting in your favorite cafe, simple shirt, warm coffee in hand. A younger woman looks your way, not because you're younger than her, but because you're not trying to be. She sees depth, she sees calm, she sees a story she wants to hear. That is real attraction. It doesn't come from clinging to youth. It comes from embracing every season of your life with quiet pride. The man who knows he's not 20 anymore and doesn't need to be, that's the man people trust the most. So if you're in your 40s, 50s, or more, don't look back on those earlier years as something you've lost. Look ahead to the journey where you don't need to rush, compete, or stay young just to be loved. You just need to show up as you are, and sometimes that's enough. Let me ask you something else. Have you ever met a man who barely spoke, but every time he did, you leaned in? Not because he was a great storyteller, but because there was something about him, something that made you want to know more, to dive deeper, to ask, what has he lived through to become like that? That's the power of mystery. And in a world where everyone overshares on social media, in conversations, in how they introduce themselves, the man who keeps something for himself, who stays quiet unless he really has something to say, he stands out in the best way. One listener told me once I was talking to this older man at a bar. He asked me just a few questions, but every time he looked at me, I felt truly seen. He didn't talk about work, didn't brag about his past, didn't name drop old relationships, but I wanted to stay. I wanted to understand him. That you can't fake, because mystery isn't about being cold. It's not about acting aloof. It comes from depth, from having a full world inside of you. A seasoned man who knows who he is, doesn't need to spill everything. He chooses what to share, when and with whom. And that makes a woman feel safe, but also curious, respected, but still exploring. Have you ever been that man? If not, hey, that's okay. Because mystery isn't about doing something strange. It's about knowing you're enough without anyone needing to know every piece of you. The Stoics have a saying, let what you don't say be as powerful as what you do say. And that's especially true in love. You don't have to unload your whole life story on the first date. You don't have to post every thought online. You don't have to prove anything. You just need to be there with calm eyes, a patient tone, and answers that don't rush. And what you'll notice is people will want to come back, to learn more, to stay longer, because your presence says more than words ever could. I want you to picture this. You're sitting across from a woman. She's met all kinds of men, the smooth talkers, the ones who try way too hard to be funny, the ones who fill silence just to avoid stillness. And then there's you. You're not rushing to ask, not rushing to impress. You're just sitting there listening, calm, steady, no judgment. And that's when she realizes you're not trying to be impressive because your presence already is. This is where we begin to see why intelligence, when it's quiet, grounded, and sincere, is one of the most attractive forces to a woman. It makes her feel safe, seen, and deeply drawn in. Have you ever sat with someone for just an hour and felt like your whole mind opened up? You didn't have to agree with everything they said, but the way they looked at life, the way they thought things through, it left you feeling enlightened. That's what I'm talking about today. A man who carries depth in his thoughts and in his emotions will always be attractive. Not because he tries to look smart, but because his words connect. You know what? Sure, women might notice your looks, but the reason they stay is the conversation. Not the slick pickup lines, not the shallow compliments, but the way you tell a story and pause at just the right moment to really listen. A man who can talk about a book he's been reading and then gently ask, what's something you've felt deeply recently? And then let silence do its work. Let her speak. No interruptions, no corrections, just presence. I once had a woman tell me I dated a man nearly 20 years older than me. At first I thought, this is going to be so boring. But the way he talked made me forget about time. Not because he spoke too much, but because I felt truly heard. Do you get that? A mature man doesn't need to dominate the conversation. He just shows up fully attentive. He listens not to reply, but to understand. And when a woman feels seen, when she feels mentally stimulated, emotionally safe, she remembers you long after the night ends. The Stoics had a saying, it's not what you say that reveals your wisdom, it's what you choose to listen to. You ever sit in a quiet cafe with someone talking about things no one else would understand and suddenly feel more peaceful inside? That's what happens when you stop pretending and just speak from truth. When you share mistakes, lessons that left scars, the things you're still learning to this day. That's not showing off. That's weighted honesty. And it lands differently. A man with depth doesn't need to show how much he knows. He just needs to guide people to a place where they feel more themselves when they're around him. So here we are. We've walked through 8 qualities of quiet, subtle, unassuming, but absolutely magnetic. Not because this man is trying to become someone, but because he's finally lived enough life to know who he is, what he wants, and that he no longer needs to prove it to anyone. Let me leave you with this. True attraction doesn't come from trying to be liked. It comes from living in full alignment with who you are. Calm, grounded, clear. That's when you stop chasing trends and start setting your own quiet standard. That's when you don't need the spotlight, because your very presence commands attention. Have you ever seen a man like that? Doesn't say much, doesn't try too hard, but when he walks into a room, everyone slows down because there's something solid, something certain, something undeniably masculine. You can be that man, not by copying, but by returning to yourself. The Stoics say, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. So let your stillness speak. Let the way you remain steady in storms be what people remember. And if you're on a journey right now trying to reclaim that inner strength, let me just say you're not alone, and you are worthy of becoming the man you've always known yourself to be. If this video spoke to you, drop a comment below. I read every single one. Hit like and subscribe, because the journey to becoming a strong, attractive, grounded man is just beginning. I'll see you in the next one. And always remember, your worth doesn't live in your past. It lives in how you stand today and where you choose to walk tomorrow.